So last time I went over my top AFC playoff thrillers, but today we're flipping the page over to the NFC. Today we're going over my top 5 NFC playoff thrillers in recent history, which last time we were here we ended up doing the AFC side, but today we're doing the NFC side, and then next time we're going to be doing another one of these lists is going to be during Super Bowl times. And then we'll be topping things out with the best playoff games in recent history from both the AFC and NFC from 2010, from each individual playoff year all the way to the present. So, for now, let's get this thing started off with number 5. I had to put this one on here because I remember this very well known as the most popular post-game interview in playoff history, which I think all of us know what this is because one of the teams is representing on what I'm wearing, and that's none other than 2014's NFC Championship game between the Seattle Seahawks hosting their division rival, the 49ers. Now, back at the time, it was Colin Kaepernick leading the charge for the 49ers and Russell Wilson leading the charge for the Seahawks. But there was some beef going on prior to that game because Richard Sherman was getting in a heated discussion with Micah Crabtree during charity softball raising charity. I don't know exactly the details, but I did hear about this. But it ultimately came down to one play that sealed it all. Colin Kaepernick was just a touchdown away from sending the Niners to their second Super Bowl appearance since their last win, which came a few years ago, which was back in 1995. My bad. Got numbers confused there. But it was ultimately Colin Kaepernick threw to the end zone, but Richard Sherman was there to bat it in to Malcolm Smith to send the Seahawks to the Super Bowl for only the second time in the 21st century, and they ultimately ended up going on to win the Super Bowl that year by beating down Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning. But that's why I have him at number 5. Number 4. I wanted to put this one up here because it was known as one of the most memorable plays to ever take place in the playoffs. And this one is probably known as the Minneapolis Miracle, which was New Orleans Saints going into Minnesota to take on the Vikings, which we all know this game as the Minneapolis Miracle. The Vikings came into this game with a high lead at the half, but Drew Brees and the Saints were trying to come back. But with about 30 seconds left, the Saints kicked a field goal and gave them a 1-point lead. All the Vikings had to do was get them in the field goal range, and they could potentially win the game. But what they did not expect was Case Keenum throwing to the right side to Stephon Diggs when he was with the Vikings, getting him to the right side. He caught the ball, and there was nobody in front of him, which ultimately led him running to the end zone for one of the most greatest play calls in the history of the NFL, which I was even shocked on how this game ended. And it was so incredible seeing Joe Buck and the others talk about it. Joe Buck talk about it with Troy Aikman, and then also along with the Viking podcast on how excited they were. I remember this play thick as a feather. But now we move in to number 3, which I have to put this one up here because it was a playoff thriller between two in-state rivals, which we all know very, very well, especially me, which is the 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams NFC Championship game from 2022. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo was leading the charge for the 49ers at that time, trying to get back to the Super Bowl, But they ultimately couldn't do it because the Rams were not here to play. They came here to win. And it was in their own house. Their stadium was loaded with 49er fans and also Ram fans as well, which was kind of split sides. But when the Rams kicked a field goal to give them the lead, all the Rams had to do was get a stop, and that's what they did. Aaron Donald got pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo, ended up throwing a game-sealing interception, which ultimately led to the demise of the 49ers again, and sending the Rams to the Super Bowl, where they would win their first Super Bowl title since 1999. Number 2. Now, I put this one on here because if it weren't for this game wouldn't have happened. Because it was a true battle of greats, which was none other than the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Tampa Bay was led by Tom Brady at the time. And the Rams did not win in the playoffs ever against Tom Brady. But with a few seconds left, it was back and forth all game, which ultimately I think ended up having Tom Brady get hit with his first unsportsmanlike conduct in his career. But other than besides that. But this, I believe, was a good game because in the last few seconds, Matthew Stafford was looking for a miracle to give them the win with the game being tied, trying to avoid overtime. But what Stafford did next was incredible. Throwing deep down the field to Cooper Kupp, who was wide open. They ended up rushing down the field, spiking the ball, and then kicking the game-ending field goal to send them to the championship game, which is at number 3, and then eventually the Super Bowl, where they would win it. But number 1, I had to put this one up here because this was one of the largest comebacks in the history of the NFC Championship game in the recent years. And Packer fans, if you're watching, you might want to look away because it was the Seahawks taking on the Green Bay Packers. I had to put this one number 1. I had to. Because, as you can tell, I'm a Seahawks fan. I saw this game's highlights. Every single time I would watch it, I would feel so bad for the Green Bay Packer fans because they were up 16-0 just before the end of the half. But when they thought we were going for a field goal, we ultimately ended up tricking them into thinking that and then throwing to the end zone for a touchdown to Gary Gilliam, and then ultimately was able to get the ball back again, and then Packers scored a field goal, which made it 19-7. And then Russell Wilson ran in for the touchdown, making it 19-14. The only thing they needed was one of the most rarest outcomes in a playoff game, an onside kick. And the Seahawks ended up recovering the football after a tipped ball by one of the Packer players, who I don't think is with the Packers anymore. And then the Seahawks ran it to Lynch, where he ran in for the touchdown, giving the Seahawks the lead by 1, 20-19. They went for 2, threw it to the end zone, and it was caught by Luke Wilson, the tight end, for the conversion. Aaron Rodgers eventually led the team down the field for a game-time field goal. And then Russell Wilson mania happened because he threw to the end zone to Jermaine Kearse to win the game for the Seattle Seahawks. Was one of the largest comebacks in NFC Championship history, which I had to put this one up here because I remember this so well. I remember it back in the back of my head because I believe I was only 10 years old at that time. I was only 10 to 11 years old when this game happened. which we all know what eventually happened next. We didn't run the dang ball, which is still a painful word to say, but at least that ain't happening anymore now that Russell Wilson's out of the Seahawks organization. At least he still can't score from the 1 yard line. But that was a double burn because that burned me too. But anyways, that's my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you're new. Turn on the notification bell for daily updates on my videos and live streams. I'll catch you all in the next one. So long for now.